Hi there, it's me, Sean Howell, once again, and today I want to talk about the trip I made a few years back to Atlanta. On October 27th and 28th, I made a trip to Atlanta, Georgia. I flew there early morning after getting off of work the night before, and I was going to take a quick 2-day trip is what I decided. And it started off, I had my friend Mauricio gave me a ride to the airport. I had worked a 12, 13-hour shift the night before. And he drove me to the airport, O'Hare, in Chicago. And then the flight was delayed like 3 hours. So I sat there and I got to catch up on some sleep before finally getting on my flight. So then I take my second ever round trip flight to Atlanta on a Tuesday morning, and I get there and then I realize that the rental car that I booked has to be picked up with a credit card, and at the time I had no credit cards with any room on them to use, and I actually didn't have a whole lot of money, period. But I ended up not being able to get a rental car because they required a actual credit card for me to pick it up. So anyways, I would be stuck taking Ubers with what very little money that I had when I decided to take this trip. So I took an Uber from the Atlanta airport to a town called Grantville, Georgia. And the significance of this town, well, there's not much there, but it was used to film some of the Walking Dead TV show. And specifically, I was going to stay in a B&B that was Walking Dead themed, and adjacent to the apartment that they used to film in season 3, where Morgan Jones had his little apartment set up. So I was going to be able to tour that apartment, and I was going to stay in this apartment next door. And so this apartment is used, and it was still set up basically how it was in the TV show. You saw I saw a few of the things that were used in the show, like the welcome mat that was picked up by, it was Michonne or Rick, but one of them, before walking into Morgan's apartment, it was a trap underneath of it. So they had the welcome sign still there, and then you walk up the stairs and you see the "not kidding you" and all the "I have to clear" wording and whatnot. You see the window that Michonne stepped out on to be on the roof when she looked down to Rick when she was looking for Morgan. They had a few different Walker sculptures that I posed with, and you could look out on the street to see the street that Morgan had all his traps set up on to catch walkers that Rick, Michonne, and Carl stumbled upon in that episode titled Clear in season 3. Inside the apartment, inside the Morgan apartment that is, they had a mock jail cell set up in there, and still on the walls they had drawn all the words that were on the walls during the Morgan episode where he had to clear, and they had all these names and maps and stuff that he was clearing. So they had that all over the walls, so it looked just like it did in the scene. There was some props in there, gun bags and barrels and empty bird cages. So it looked just like it did on that episode, in that episode of the show. So I got to see that and got to tour it, and they let me tour it by myself. Like, I basically was given an intro by this lady that lived in town. This was a very small town, only a few streets, I think a Dollar General and maybe a small convenience store, but there wasn't much in this town. But they used it to film, and it was a good location for what they were trying to use. There was a cot in there, like what Morgan was laying on. They had a protein bar box and a can of chocolate pudding, like when Carl was eating in one of the other episodes. So I got to tour that apartment and see all the Morgan stuff. And then I got to stay next door in a B&B that was Walking Dead themed, and it had things on the walls that were signed by cast members. They had the paper mache cat that Michonne had taken from one of the stores nearby was in there. It was like 7 bedrooms, and I only needed one. Obviously, I was staying there by myself. In a kitchen, couple bathrooms. It was a real big setup for one person, but it was nice. It was a nice place. You know, people came there a lot to stay, and now they had tore it down in the last few years. They had torn it down, so it's no longer there. So I got to see it before it was now non-existent anymore. Also in that town, from that same episode, they had the wall that said "Away with you" when they were first walking into the town, and then at the end of it, when they walked out of the town, you could see it. So I got to see that wall, and it still says "Away with you," and I took some pictures with that and stood by it. Like I said, I got to see the street that Morgan had all his traps set up on. Also, there was a few other buildings used in filming different episodes from Walking Dead. I got to see those. That night, was kind of low on cash, so I went and I walked up to the only place in town, Dollar General, and I grabbed some snacks and I think pizza rolls or something to eat, and that was my dinner for the night. But I was just like enjoying my time alone, my time away. It was a nice little trip for 2 days, and that first day, even though it was delayed by the flight, and then of course the whole car issue, I was still able to enjoy it. I toured Morgan's apartment, like I said, in the streets nearby. Checked out both day and night. I took pictures. The night it started pouring down, raining, and I was walking around basically out in the woods in the rain, and it was actually just kind of fun. I felt like I was like in The Walking Dead because the town was very small and very few people in it, and especially at night, like you could walk the streets and there's nobody. So it was a neat little trip that I had there. The following morning, then I would take another Uber into Sonoy, Georgia, where they would film much more of The Walking Dead. There, they would have Woodbury, which would be the town used in season 3. They filmed that there, so I got to walk the streets of Woodbury, and many of the buildings are easily recognizable. Some of them had some show props in that I got to see. And then I got to see where they had Alexandria, and they were still filming when I was there. I believe they were filming in season, was it 10 maybe at that time? But they were still filming, and they had the walls set up for Alexandria. Cast were still staying there, many of them in that community when I was there. I didn't stumble into or run into any cast members, but I did, like I said, see many different filming locations that were used in all different episodes. Some of the houses that were used to film Carl's pudding house, where he was sitting on the roof and eating chocolate pudding, and then the house where Rick, Michonne, and Carl had stayed at before going to Terminus was there. Saw the railroad tracks that they were used in the filming for the show as well. I did a really nice tour guide from the Georgia Tour Company. She was very knowledgeable of the show, and actually was impressed by my knowledge of my nerdy self. But she gave me a tour around the town and gave me a walkthrough of everything. It was a private tour because nobody else was on it at that time, so I got a one-on-one tour, and basically everything I did on that trip was Walking Dead. I ate at Nick and Norman's, had a nice meal there, which is Greg Nicotero and Norman Reedus' restaurant. That was a pretty good meal I had. Then I went and toured the little Walking Dead museum that they have in the town there, and got to see so many. There's like hundreds of props that were used in all seasons of the show, from the teddy bear in the first episode that the little girl picked up, to prison used suits from that season, and the saw that Merle cut his hand off with, some Daryl crossbows, knives used in the show, Rick's watch, Herschel's watch, outfits used by Rick, Michonne, Lori, Daryl, etc., etc. All sorts of props from the show were in that. And then I did a little shopping, of course, in the gift shop, and bought some magnets. I bought a shot glass and a few other little things there. And then basically took an Uber back to the airport to get back on at Atlanta to go back into that second night. So it was not even 2 full days, but it was a nice little trip, a nice little break from work, and I was off those 2 days anyways, and it went fast. But I come back to the airport in Atlanta, and I run into Chris Jericho, a wrestler, WWE, AEW. I happened to run into him at the airport. It was still in the heart of the COVID nonsense, so he was all masked up, and I didn't stop and pose for a picture or anything. But I went up to him and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he just kind of gave me like a nod or whatnot. I think he was trying to just avoid people, which can be understandable. But yeah, so I ran into Chris Jericho at the end of my trip to Walking Dead, and so that was a nice little cherry on top of the trip that I had. 2-day trip, October 2020. Wasn't a lot going on anyways. It was a nice little trip. I got to see some Walking Dead stuff, and it was fun.